Letter urging the government to halt its emergency police bail bill. The emergency legislation will be rushed through the Commons today as the government seeks to reverse a High Court judgment made back in May. The ruling stops police from bailing suspects for more than 4 days. Joseph Monson is director of Mary Monson Solicitors and represents Mr Hookway, whose case highlighted problems with the 96-hour limit. Good morning.
Good morning.
Just remind us briefly what happened with Mr Hookway's case.
Well, the situation at Salford Magistrates Court was the District Judge, Judge Feinstein, back in May, made a decision that it was going to be it was not going to be possible to renew the custody time limit beyond 36 hours when the police were attempting to do so without new evidence. And the police in that hearing said that there was no new evidence because the time that after he'd been arrested originally back in November, the 4 days had expired from that point. And the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, he said, and then the Judicial Review Judge said sometime after that. In fact, that was in May. The earlier decision was in, I think, March. It
is conceivable, isn't it, that 4 days may not be enough time to collate all the evidence required to satisfy the CPS and bring about a charge.
You're completely right, and that is why PACE, which was very well thought out legislation, which was years in the making back in the 1980s, actually makes a provision where there is new evidence you can re-arrest and re-detain. So in fact what's been presented to us in the last few days as a loophole, a situation where murderers and rapists, and of course it's always sexual offenders in the tabloids who are going to be running free, are going to be running free on the streets. The reality is, first of all, these are people the police want to bail already. So that's wrong for a start in terms of the way that we've been told all of that. But as far as those individuals are concerned, if new evidence comes to light, they can already be arrested, and PACE makes that provision. What we object to is the police powers being expanded upon with no public debate.
The difficulty is, because of the emergency legislation being set up now, is that it will allow judges to interpret, presumably, this in a way such that if it wasn't there, that the police would be in a weakened position.
Well, that may be the case, but there is an argument actually that says if the police aren't playing by the rules and haven't been for a number of years, and of course nobody accepts in reality that it's 25 years they haven't been playing by the rules, it's the last 5 or 6 years as their resources have got lower, and they're, instead of investigating properly and using those 4 days, they've seldom got the suspect, even on serious cases, in for more than 4 or 5 hours because they don't have the police cells or they don't have the resources or whatever, and then they're putting them on bail on the back burner. Well, it's no solution to say, therefore, let's justify this putting them on bail on the back burner for a year, 2 years, 3 years, because even from the point of view, of course, from victims, no victim will feel reassured if a murderer or a rapist against whom there could be proper evidence if they were properly investigated at the beginning when the incident happened was put on bail with conditions, because bail with conditions is no substitute for justice.
No, and it still means that you have a certain amount of freedom. But for that reason, you can be at bail, you can be living at home, you say bail with restrictions, but for that reason, is there not a halfway house here where 4 days is perhaps perceived to be too short?
Well,
is maybe a month's bail more realistic?
You may very well have hit the nail on the head, because what I'm here to talk about today is not that, in terms of what the law says, well, this is ideal or this isn't. Of course, laws need regular reform through parliamentary debate, discussion, the type of discussion that we're having now, the types of discussions that civil liberties groups have with police groups to find what the acceptable balance is. Of course, those conversations need to take place, but not as the result of 3 days of scaremongering, a load of conversation in the tabloids about murderers running free, and all of a sudden overnight legislation, which is, of course, as we know from what happened with the NHS emergency legislation, nearly always a bad idea.
Thank you for your time. Joseph Monson from Mary Monson Solicitors. It's 8:41.
The press complaints